Hi all and welcome to An Evening with Thomas, and our guest today is Darrell Hibbert, and he's going to tell us all about his life story and experiences and shortly. But that song, A Great Day for Freedom, this is what this is all about. Obviously we have the shows every Thursday and it's about freedom for all, but these shows can also the Evening with Thomas shows is a great day for personal freedom. Because too often in life, all of us will have gone, who listen to these shows and my shows of a Thursday, we've all gone through life being shut down. We end up introverted. We end up with the eyes being rolled at, abused, ridiculed, because we have a view of life that's considered not normal. But what is normal? Who decides what's normal and what's not? You know, whatever you experience in life, be it Darrell, myself, or anybody else, don't allow anyone else to tell you what's normal and what's not. There is no normal. It's all about experiences, and so we have had to endure most of our lives, if not all of our lives, until the advent of the internet, and we realised there's lots more not normal people, as they call it. And so it was a good choice, a song that Darrell made, A Great Day for Freedom, and I hope this show is his own personal Freedom Day, where he can comfortably come across and tell his story. Not their story, but our story. Hi, Darrell. How are you, sir?
Hello, Thomas. Hello, everybody listening.
So, we had a chat earlier, and I know a little bit about your life, but before we get into your childhood and life with parents and schools and whatnot, you always had, from an early age, which is common to most of us, something's not right. You became, like most of us have, an observer. Is that the case with you very early on?
Yeah, pretty much that's the case. I don't know at what age that happened, whether it was a light bulb moment or it just kind of grew on me that because of my childhood, I was pretty much of an observer. We were, as a lot of kids, I guess, back in the 50s, were supposed to be seen and not heard, and that was the way I was brought up. So, yeah, we tended to be that way, and I guess I was a little more observant than some, and I often wondered why things were a certain way. In particular, for me, for my life as a child, I thought I was pretty abnormal because, we were pretty much shut in the house, living in the city, and I didn't see a lot of other people. When I was about age 4 or 5, in that neighborhood of age, I began to experience more of the life outside of the home, and I would see these people smiling and laughing, and for me that wasn't any part of my life experience, and I thought that was really strange, and that was one of my first memories of actually thinking about what the heck is going on in the world. I couldn't figure out why people smiled and why they were laughing, and like, what was that about? At my age, you didn't know what a joke was, obviously, and my life wasn't all that happy. So, yeah, I began being a bit introspective, I guess.
Yeah, I think
early age.
Yeah, I think that applied. It's not just to the listeners. I've spoken obviously to other people in the community. I've spoken to David Wilcock in person. I've spoken to Nasser Harriman, Kerry Cassidy, and you name it, a whole host of different people, and Randy Morgans and Shane, and they've all gone through this same thing. Nasser Harriman, some of the members will be familiar with, a brilliant science brain, and yet it was self-taught. And so suddenly, because he didn't learn by the book, that's not classed as normal, so it's not valid. And, and this is the way life has sort of evolved with the programming over the last 50 years in particular. It's increased dramatically. And people like ourselves have all been shut down and you said earlier, abnormal. But the biggest question in life is, what is normal? And there is no normal. And eventually we all go on this journey of finding out what's normal, what's not normal, what's life and what's not life. And here we all are today. We're all still fighting, despite what they've thrown at us. And it's a triumph for all of us. Everyone that listens to this show has all overcome major hurdles in their life. And the biggest one has been shut down, like you said. So this kind of started for you in childhood, did it not? And so how was life with parents and whatnot?
Well, it wasn't very good. I don't know what made my parents the way they were, but I think earlier on I accepted the fact that, like, when a baby is born, they're a happy human being, generally speaking. So it must be the environment that caused them to not become happy people. And I was aware of that early on, although I didn't adopt that particular attitude till later on in life. But yeah, both of my parents, my father was abusive physically, and there was times when there were puddles on the floor from being so terrified from him playing his mind games with all the lights off and abusing my mother physically and that type of thing. And when you see that as a young person, I've learned since that has a traumatic effect on you. And actually, even before that, I learned at the age of around 40 that there was trauma for me in vitro. I won't go into the details. It's a little bit nasty, but apparently that has an effect. I don't know what the actual details of that would be as they pertain to my life, but there was a number of things when I was young that kind of set me back as far as not kind of fitting in to what was normal, because I didn't experience what I know today as being normal. And I don't know, I guess if they say every adversity has an opportunity, so it made me sort of introspective and a bit of an observer at an early age, and I guess my brain developed to be in that fashion, so that even today I still luckily have those attributes, and if a pin drops in the corner, I want to know why it dropped there, type of thing. It's just the way I've developed, kind of strange, but that's just the way it is for me now, which I think is a good thing. I've used it. I've turned the lemon into lemonade, not intentionally, but it worked out that way.
Yeah, it's the dark lessons again, isn't it? It's just that some of the dark lessons that people in the alternative community have gone through are way beyond normal. There's that word again. There's no real need to be that way. But there was a particular increase of what I know of different children that came in the late 50s, early 60s. They were the sort of the way shows in many ways, and unfortunately, due to interference and whatnot, a lot of those first batch were introduced with very poor parents, and it was deliberate. And it all depends on the inner strength of the individual, because if you come through that experience and can stand tall and not let it affect you too much into your life, it's going to affect up to a point. But whether it's in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s or 70s, at that point where you go, you know what, I'm not wearing that suit anymore. That yes, I was a victim. Yes, I was this, and yes, I was that. And how am I going to use that and transmute it into something that's going to be beneficial to me? Because holding on to it is clearly not. And that's the key to most of us. You know, Nasser Harriman was classed as stupid at school with the science brain he's got. You know, I got told I was worthless. You know, and many of us have gone through the same thing, this insecurity, and we're searching ways into the world, and the abuse, both physical and mental, and in some cases, members of our group, sexual as well. You know, it's as a kid, you know, those traumas stick unless you are able to deal with it. And kids shouldn't have had to go through that. But yes, you know, the fact that we're all still here and all relatively sane is a triumph in itself, and people don't always see it that way. Is that how you see yourself? Yeah, you've come through that and come out stronger in some aspects?
I have, but I think what you just described as those people who are maybe Wayshores coming into this world in the 50s and 60s, I see some attributes, I suppose, in that, at least for me, in when I graduated from here in Canada, it's a grade 8 school, and I think that's maybe into what they call middle school. Here it's grade 9 or the beginning of high school. So in grade 8, I went to the counselor's office, and my parents were advised that I was a bit slow for learning, and that I should be going into what they called the kids called it the dum-dum school, which was actually a trade school. And my dad my stepfather had 6 trade tickets, and he had a grade 8 education, but he had educated himself. And so I had learned the trades from him. We had a lathe and a bunch of machines in the garage, and you know, that I got involved with that type of thing with him, learning those things. But I was never interviewed to say, you know, what do you want to do? And one of the reasons my academics level was probably somewhat below the rest of the school grade at that time was because I had gone to a number of public schools. And so there was never a fluent transition from grade to grade, going to each grade in 2 separate schools. Yeah. Exposed me to different criteria and different protocols that each school had. So that set me back, but I was never asked, you know, what do you want to do? It was just, here, you should be going to this trade school. And I was too stubborn to accept their advice. And so they said, well, they'll give you one season, I guess, or whatever it was, and see how you do. And I barely passed, and so I was able to stay on in the high school rather than go through academic school or through the trade school. So, yeah, I can identify with what you just explained about the school system. The same thing happened with me, and probably happened to a lot of the Wayshores nowadays. I think it's a common theme.
Yeah, everyone has the ability to be paranoid, or they're always picking on me, and I think we all do that to a degree. But when you suddenly correlate it with a load of different people who all think that this world is not correct in what it's been portrayed as, from all different walks of life and all different countries and all around the world, and they're all gone through the same, then you realise then that's not a coincidence, that's a program. Like in essence, it's in some cases anyway, It's not as severe as the program for the Illuminati kids, as we did with the Svarley show. That's fairly brutal, but I think there'll be some who listen to that show who will have experienced some element of that with their own parents, and but this is the same thing, and they go from the Illuminati Svarley trainer, because Svarley was a trainer. She wasn't necessarily. She spoke to her as she decided this was wrong. So she did administer some of that brutality, and she had the courage to realise that was wrong. And then they go from there. These are kids from 2 till 6, or 0 till 6, because they start even before birth, as some of the things were mentioned in that show. And then they go to school. Right. And then, of course, depending on how their training's gone, training in inverted commas, they're then introduced, the Illuminati kids are to the Waldorf Steiner schools, which we both have researched rather well, and I still haven't got round to doing that show. We go through the lesser version because we are being trained for something different. They're there to remain in power, and our system is to knock us off the path, because we're all on the right path when we were born. And then parents come in and people come into your lives that knock you off the path, through violence or mental abuse or just ridicule. Many of us have gone through the same thing. And this goes right through school life, and certainly went through mine. My parents were not great. They just weren't great. I think both of them had realised they were wrong in certain elements, and it was only till later in life that they realised that you can't do that to kids. Some people are just not meant to fit in the box, and this is part of the problem in society. We're all one size fits all. Everyone goes into the same box. The classic example is the cover of the Pink Floyd The Wall, where you've got a school that's in the shape of a mincemeter, and you put all the kids in the top. And so what happens when they all come out in a mash the same? It's the same thing, but not everyone's the same. And so school was rather difficult for you, apart from the fact that you went to all kinds of different schools. Did you feel that it was boring, or did you feel that you some of the things that they were being told didn't fit in, and like you'd already learned? But some of us felt that when you went into school, I already know this stuff and it's boring. So what was some of your experiences in school?
I can't say that I thought, at least I don't recall thinking that I already knew some of this stuff, but I know I was very bored. Like, it was not interesting whatsoever. And at an early age, actually at grade 6 to grade 8, I knew that I was counting. Let's see, I've got 4 years to go. And then at whatever age that would be, 16, 17, I suppose, I learned that when you graduate high school, you get to do what you want to do. And I just wanted to get the hell out of school. I just could not stand it. So I dug in, and I did the best I could to get out of school. I ended up failing, I think, 1 grade. And although I think we had something like 8 or 9 subjects. The only one I failed was French. I hated languages. It just wasn't my thing. But when you failed one of the subjects, you failed the whole year. They changed that afterwards. Actually, they got a swimming pool after I left, too. That really bugged me. I love swimming. It came in after I left high school, the year after. So it was, whatever. But I couldn't wait to get out of school. I did fairly well in the trades, and actually surprisingly to me, I did well in physics when we learned about light waves and wavelengths, lambda frequencies. I don't know why I did well in that, but I normally would get like 60%, and I jumped up when that subject came in physics. I jumped up to about 85%, and it surprised me and a bunch of other people, I suppose. But that for some reason resonated with me, and that was one of the few academic subjects I excelled in. The rest were pretty much the trades, but that was just because of previous life experiences. I had already spent probably 3 or 4 years on a big steel lathe, so they give you them little Mickey Mouse ones in high school, and I was really bored with it because I was turning brake drums to certain thousandths of an inch and so forth, and they had me making a tack hammer. And the same thing happened with the Boy Scouts. I guess at about age 13, 14, my parents bought me a Scout uniform, and that lasted one day. I went to Scouts, and they were doing this dib, 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 dob, dob, bull, ass. Yeah. And it was like, man, I've been out in the bush like from age 12 to 14, so 2 years, every day I could. I got out in the bush. I was sucking back all the library books I could on nature, birds. I had egg collections of all the wild birds from the area and so forth.
That was something I used to do, egg collection. I think it was that era, and suddenly, it'll be frowned upon now. You shouldn't be doing that. But it was kind of the thing most of us at that age grew up with. Most lads went nesting, as they called it. And,
right.
Some were responsible. They would take one for the collection and observe, and others were not so. But when you look back at it now, you think it's not the best hobby to be involved in.
Have you ever blown a rotten egg?
Yes. Yeah.
That's nasty.
Yeah. Well, I remember there used to be about 5 of us that were involved in it, and there was one particular bird that we could that completed the finch section, and it was fairly high up a tree. I think it was about 40, 50 foot. And the first branch was not till 10 foot. It was, I don't know the name of different trees. And so we have to stack. One went on the shoulders, and then another one got pulled up. And then once you got onto the branches, they were every 2 or 3 foot. And so this lad, he wasn't the brightest, to put it that way. He got to the top, and he shouts down, "There's 4 in it." And Carl says, "Just take one. Just take one." "You sure? What if I break it?" "Well, if you break it, I'll break your neck." He shouted back up. And so he climbed all the way down, and so it must have been 40, 45 foot, this tree. And he jumped off the last branch. Well, I don't know whether you used to do this. You used to hold the egg, if it was small enough, underneath your tongue. He jumped off the last. He jumped off the last branch and swallowed it. Well, my mate went absolutely berserk. I was booting him. He's, "You idiot, you've ruined me egg." And he goes, "I'm really sick, Carl. I'm really sick. I'm going to throw up." So, but I say, when you look at it, you mention that to young kids now, and they don't know what you're talking about. And that's how times change over the years. But the idea going back. Maybe we can talk about that now. The idea of if you had your life the way the kids are now, where they're stuck in the house and looking at screens. We were all out in nature. We weren't always doing the best things, but we had an element of freedom, far more than now, where everything's controlled. Would you have like to have been a young kid now?
No, in fact, I feel sorry for them. I really do. It's they're. I don't know. I see the poor upbringing, or what I perceive as poor upbringing, when you see some of the kids acting up in us, like in a grocery store, like back in the day. I mean, if you acted up like that, the parent didn't care where they were. You got a backhander, and that was it. You better, toe the line type of thing. But not only that, these children are secluded, basically, individually, where there's no interaction with the other children. They're interacting with an AI system or a computer, and they think differently. I don't see joy in young children that we used to laugh a little bit and so forth, but I don't see that joy in children now, and they seem to be cold, if that's the right word. I don't know what it is, but they don't. Well, there's the made, hey, car coming, and that was it. Everybody cleared the street until the car went by, and you went back at it. But they're not allowed that nowadays, so they're pretty much shut down, I think, as far as creative juices and whatever else. So, I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, it's a box within a box within a box.
Yeah,
and this is the way it's gone now, and you can't really break through them. And like I say, it is bad.
And I think that even happened a few years back. I know I tried to take my nephew. I had bought dirt bikes for my son, and they had a track down in the outskirts of Hamilton for their dirt bikes. And I tried to get my nephew to go along to get away from his computer to do that. And he promised me he would go, and I held him to the promise, but it was reluctantly so. He did not want to go. And he went and he watched it and so forth. As soon as he got back home, bang, he was right back on the computer within minutes. And I thought, well, I didn't even faze him in the least bit. He was begrudgingly there the whole time, and it was like over a period of a few hours. So I don't know. I look back at my childhood, and I remember when I was like 3 or 4 or something, and pretty much it was a very gruesomely lonesome time under a tree in the backyard, and I kind of had a hole dug in the ground where I used to just sit, and I don't know. It was it was really lonesome, but it depends how you look at things. I could say, well, at least, I didn't grow up in this area or era of time, and at least I had a car. They didn't give me a Frisbee, that wouldn't have been good. So,
yeah.
There's...
Where are we? It's just echoing again. Where were we? But whilst you were not kind of academic, you found you were a quick learner in other fields at a young age. So how did that develop? There's a thing about taking apart clocks was one of the things you'd mentioned.
Oh, well, yeah, that was at 8 years old. No, it was before that. I guess I was about 6 or 7, so that was early years. I was a really curious person, and it's kind of strange, that you hear the words, well, you want to know what makes it tick. Well, literally, I did. So I took I took their old Westclox clock apart, and I didn't know there would be a problem putting it together. They seemed to think there would be, but I put it right back together. But I don't know if it was because I was astute enough to do it, but I was pretty much threatened if I didn't get that together by the time my dad got home, that I pretty much knew what was going to happen. So it might have been fear-driven too, I don't know. But I got it back together, and I always had that curiosity, I suppose. But later on, school wasn't so good. But when it came to being interested or seeing something I was interested in, then I was like 100% in both feet. And nature, I could tell you, just going out in nature, even now I can tell what bird calls are what bird calls, what egg is what bird, what rabbits do, their life cycles, deer life cycles. And
filling your life with for argument's sake, academia, that's not going to develop later in life, but you may be a hands-on person or the other way around. And suddenly most of us that are in this community get bored really quickly if it's not providing that correct stimulus. And that's been a key in many of us, really. If it's interesting, we're capable of learning anything and adapting.
Right.
You know. Is that what you found?
Yeah, exactly. I actually, while I was working as an environmental technologist there at the steel industry, I guess I was in my early 20s. I was lucky enough to get introduced to that field and lucky enough to get a job right out of high school because of an association with a fellow who hired me to do some work on his homes. And his friend who lived down the street, I found out later, he told me to go down to the steel industry. He'd have a job for me, and he liked me because I guess I'd given him some ears of corn from a crate that I got from the store that I worked at. And anyhow, long story short, he gave me the job as a technologist there, and I learned the trade from them. They sent me to school and so forth, but it wasn't. I decided that I wanted more, so I went to here it's the university in this area is McMaster University. So I took some courses there, and one of the courses, I wanted to know what made people tick and what made me tick. Again, like the old clock thing. So I took the first year psychology course, and that quickly ended because they were teaching about rat T mazes and how to condition a rat into going down these certain alleyways in these mazes. And I thought, what the heck has that got to do with how I think or why I think? And I'm sure it had some bearing on it, but it wasn't advanced enough for me. So I lost my $300 or what it was. Like within the first 2 days of the course, I bailed, and I went up to the local college and I enrolled for some business courses, which were pretty dry. But I thought I should learn more, but it wasn't for me. So no. I ended up, spending more time in the library where I could choose the books I wanted to know and choose the knowledge I wanted to know. And even though I don't know how far that advanced me monetarily, at least I was getting some satisfaction out of the time spent trying to learn things. So, yeah, pretty much parallels what you've been explaining about.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting you mentioned the rat and the maze, because that's one of the things Shane the Runa mentioned about interactions with the parents, and one of the terms that was used is humanity is in the maze. And they kind of see us as animals anyway. And if certain groups or individuals are about to escape the maze, they move the walls. So that explains that terminology. And that's kind of what we've been doing over the ages. There's been various freedom movements, protesting movements, which then end up becoming a religion, which is Protestant. That's the original term. And then you had the Renaissance period and the French Revolution, and you name it. And all they do is they observe from an overview, and then they move the walls. So if too many are going towards the exit of the maze, they move the walls. So you end up like a hamster. You're just spinning around in the wheel. And that's kind of, it then explains the loops. It's where you just repeat history over and over again. And the key is what I keep saying in the show, is we have to think and act different. Because if you keep thinking the same, you're staying on the same loop. You're staying in the same program. So.
Yeah. that was one of the hardest things for me. I learned that from your show. And so I started trying to do that and observe that. And that was one of the more difficult things for me, was to think differently, because I was pretty much conditioned that if somebody got in my face, like, that wasn't good for them. I was very reactive, as far as don't screw with me, because I had had enough in my life. When I left the family home, I was 18. I had just started my job at the steel mill, and my mother was getting into my face, so I pretty much told her to, you know what, and I went back and apologized. To her, but I had had enough, and and I was actually pretty afraid, because I thought, geez, I don't know how to pay hydro. I've got all these. Like, I had just started my job. I was still busing it back and forth to work. I virtually didn't know how to, like, I could wash a dish and do my own laundry. We were doing those types of things, but I didn't know anything about the outside world as far as, how do you pay a bill? I had just opened my bank account, and it was open for a week. But, yeah, I pretty much bailed early on that. I just had enough. So,
yeah,
everyone I guess the wall got
boundaries.
moved back on me. Yeah, for sure. They kept moving the wall back, like you said, though.
Yeah, it's the what they're trying to do is get you into the 5 hooks, and once you're into those 5 hooks, which is religion, sexual issues, money. I'm trying to think of the other 2 now. They'll come to me. The five hooks that keep you in the program. They know that you're then relying. They're your goals. So religion's coming to save you. It's external. Drink and drugs are the other 2. And so if they get you on one of them or more of them hooks, you're staying on that wheel of their program. So you're basically going banging your head into the same maze walls and not going into the next chamber, which may lead to the exit. And so this is what they've been doing, particularly over the last 70 years with the program and the MK Ultra and all kinds of other stuff, is to keep you and push you into those 5 hooks. And the key is to step away from them.
I'm still having trouble with one of the hooks.
Well,
I don't know if I'll ever get over it, if I ever want to, but the financial one, I was hooked into that, and that kept me going most of my life until I gave up on the business thing. I had 2 partners who pretty much screwed me over for the businesses I had developed in taking odors out of cars, and they're actually on I won't say the name, it doesn't matter, but they're the one company that I had developed or started is now on the stock exchange worth millions, and one of the patents that I have is being used by 2 companies, and they're making millions on those 2 patents, but I didn't have the money. They had to fight it, and I didn't have the will to. It wasn't about that, and so I thought, whatever. Someday, karma's a bitch, and those guys are going to. Yeah. In the one case, the one individual is being sued because he franchised the concept with the cars and taking odors out, and in the laundry business, and I'm sure he's watching his back now because the last time I heard, he lost a lawsuit that was in the 4 figures. So he was in trouble. And you mess around with the wrong people who own them big hotels, I'm sure you're going to get your toe stepped on. But,
there's always someone bigger that will come in and trample, and this is kind of why, the money is an issue. Where kind of it's almost become a new religion to too many, And, we do realise it's important for living and life as it stands. But if the goal is to make excessive amounts, then that's the hook. It doesn't mean to say we all have to live in poverty either. This is where the balance comes in. And so, people wanting to set up, for argument's sake, we've had loads of proposals put into the People's Club. And, once the funding comes in, we'll look at all of them. And if they're valid, and the funds are there, then it will go forward. But it will have to come with an education, because if that person is doing it because they can earn $100,000-$200,000 a year, which is excessive, then whilst that may be great for you, if you're earning an excessive wage, you have to realise you are doing that at the expense of somebody else. So the excess, the desire for the excess amount of money is what creates the bottom end and the poverty. So if everyone is kind of re-educated in a better way, so to have what you need and a small amount more for some emergencies, and that's enough, then more people can have the desired amount and a small amount for emergencies, and it goes across the board, and then there's no need for this pendulum swing of have and have-nots. And that's the key. We all need money to get by. But if it becomes your God, then you've just trapped yourself into one of the 5 hooks.
Yeah, I think I realized that at the time when these guys were messing with my businesses. I don't think they're aware. I'm sure they're not aware. And I was lucky enough to be aware that when you help somebody at a lower level for no return whatsoever, the joy you get from that is the payment, and you can't buy that. I know that's kind of cliche, but if you experience that, you'll know that to be a fact. I remember this one time, I was pretty much down and out. I was struggling to keep the business going. It was in the middle of the wintertime, and this one lady walked by the street that I was on. I was returning from getting some brochures printed up at one of the local print shops, and it was snowing and really nasty weather. And this elderly lady, I guess she would be in her 80s, maybe a bit older, she walked by me and kind of stunned me. She was poorly dressed, just a sweater and slippers, and she was obviously really cold. And I walked by her, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, holy crap, I'm going home. I'm going to be warm. I'm dressed pretty warm, and there she's freezing. So anyhow, I took off my gloves, and I just said, here, they weren't expensive, just cheap Finsulate gloves. But I just had to do something, and I thought, well, it was something. I don't know if it was more to appease me or to help her, to be honest, because I felt so bad. But she started crying, and oh boy, my eyes started watering. I had to get the heck out of there. And I thought, well, they're just a pair of gloves. But the feeling you get from helping somebody like that, I mean, what were they, $3 gloves or something? And I still talk about that to this day. Like, that's a memory that's invaluable to me. I'll never forget that. And I don't know if that was the start of it for me, but it was one of the memories that you just described there. Of money's not the end all be all, and that's why I pretty much packed in business. I said, the heck with it. I got a job working in the old age homes, and some of the stories I learned from the old age homes, some of the old guys there and so forth, it was pretty rewarding as opposed to the $50,000 a day or a year job that I had in the factory, which, it was one of the better jobs there, but it wasn't rewarding except in the monetary sense. And so now that's why Hilly and I are doing this, or hopefully going to be doing this gallery. I like creating flutes, and Hilly's a pretty good painter, so we're doing that. We won't be making any money at it, probably. We're going to keep it at a low cost so that the rest of the painters that we bring in artists will be able to afford it. Our costs will be their costs will be at cost. It's not going to be about the money, and we'll be happy doing that because we needed the help and it wasn't there. So, we've learned that lesson that it's more rewarding to help than it is to gain financially.
Yeah, well, this is where re-education comes in about what is value in life. And most people will say, well, I've given this example before. A Rembrandt or somebody else picture from 400 years ago is worth X number of millions, and yet someone can, like Hilly, could maybe copy it. And Marilyn Brannan does some brilliant paintings, and it's worth $15, $20 or $50 or $100. Who decides what's of value? The food we throw away as Americans, certainly in the Western world, and we think, I'm not using that. That might be a full meal to somebody else, the rest of the world, and this is where people have lost perspective in many aspects. It's what we need to return to what is value, and it doesn't always have to have a monetary value with it.
Right. I just watched an ad on the internet here, and it hit me exactly in the manner that you just described. And I thought, man, you guys, that's a great idea. But if you look at it, you realize that food could have been eaten by a human being, and you guys are using it to power up your gas barbecue. And that's the extent that I guess the powers that be are conditioning us to think and I guess that's supposed to be a normal thing, to look at new technology as being advantageous, but I don't see it being that way.
No, it's for too long. We've been conditioned to look after number one and not look after each other. And that's where the people can change it. It doesn't cost nothing. Caring and sharing and giving someone a bit of attention and a bit of love and a bit of your time costs nothing. And they're far more valuable than giving someone something else. I give my fiance a $4,000 diamond ring. But if you go and buy one for $40 to that person, that's the ultimate. We've lost that value. Human value.
I think we've been conditioned to think that way. That's a concern of mine, that what you just described is obvious to some of us, but to others who are conditioned to think otherwise, do they have a hope of turning their thinking around? I know we're supposed to think differently, but I see some people, whether they have a soul or not, or if they're a soulless person, but I don't see them as being almost able to think in those terms. And I don't know what's going to happen to them. I suppose that's going to be that decision when the two worlds split or whatever happens here. But I feel sorry in a sense that they're so conditioned that they can't think for themselves. They just can't. They can't see it.
No.
So.
Well, it kind of shocked people when I put out the figure of there's a possibility that between 70 and 90% of the people in here are synths. And that kind of bothers many people. But when you observe, you can spot them a mile away. You don't have to listen. When you observe their actions and behaviour, it's alarming. Look at them, how many false flags we've had, and they can't see the basics, that there's a drill the same day. I mean... It's not rocket science.
I've showed I've showed a certain person in the family some information with regards to Bitcoin, and who actually initiated that whole program and what I think it's about, and gave them backup information. And I see they just posted another post on their personal webpage, which I get to see, and it's about a new system of Bitcoin and how you can save your money and do this and that with it. And I'm thinking, like, this person is a pretty educated person. He has a master's degree, which I suppose doesn't mean much. He has a good memory maybe, but in any case, yeah, it's just not there. And I don't know. I guess it's what will be, and it bothers me to some extent that some of the family members, including my own immediate family, are still asleep, and they're just cognitive dissident. They just do not want to know.
No.
And I don't know if that's conditioning or they're soulless, so they're non-empathetic, but whatever the situation is, I'm expecting that, I don't know, I probably won't see them again at some point in time, and oh well, that's the way it is. Yeah. It's not for wanting to help, or, you can't put an anchor around your foot and expect to swim either, so what are you going to do?
Right, we're going to, that's an hour, so we're going to have a music break, and perhaps this song is rather fitting. It's called Some Humans Ain't Human. We'll be back shortly.
Thank you.
Hi all, and welcome back to An Evening with Thomas, and Daryl Hibbard is the guest today. I'm having some feedback issues, apologies for that. Some humans ain't human. That's going out to the synths. A kind of fitting song, that.
I thought so.
It's funny how that all just played right into what we were talking about, and then just fitted nicely in.
I find that happens a lot in my life lately. There's some synergistic happenings that I just see them and I go, oh yeah, there's another one, whereas before it would be, oh geez, what was that about? Now Hilly and I see that. I think we're even manifesting things, to be honest with you, because
yes.
We just see things happening in our life now, and before it would be, oh well, that was lucky, and now I don't think that's luck at all. I don't believe in luck anymore. Not that I had some bad luck, so I believe in that part. But
yeah, But we all do that. We all do that because we're not comfortable in our own skin, and so we put it down to being lucky, or a coincidence, or God did it, or Jesus did it, or you name it. Anything bar. It was ourself that did it, and this is a problem, a common problem. And one of the things you'd mentioned is you wanted to be a teacher, but you've had some varied employments, but you actually really wanted to be a teacher. Is that because you thought the teachers were teaching rubbish and would like to go on a different path, or was there another reason for that?
I wanted to be an authoritarian figure with a bit of a heart.
Yeah.
I figured they were all just complete jerks, and I was going to be one that wasn't.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I suppose I didn't like what they were teaching, and I was naive enough to think at that age that I could teach what I want. I know that's not the case now, but that's what I thought. I thought I could be a good teacher because I thought most of them were jerks, and I could be a good one because they taught me what not to be like, basically. So that was one of the reasons. But I had no idea what I was going to be, and no guidance along that lines. I was just pretty much left on my own. So it came to that grade of school where you were going to be booted out on your butt, and you had to decide what courses you want. So it was trade school or some trade-off. So I was one of the only boys in high school who was taking as subjects bookkeeping, typing, machine shop, science, and history and geography. Like that was almost like opposites, if you will, in subject matter. But it was barely allowed to do that. And most of I think there was one other boy in the class who was in the typing class, and I don't even know why I took that class. It just seemed like, well, pushing a key is not as hard as operating a lathe, so I should be able to pass that one. But I don't know.
But it comes back to again, it goes back to the childhood, doesn't it, where you don't feel you're being told that you're not good enough, or whatever, in whatever format that is, and so you then go on a period through life where you're overdoing it to prove to others that you can do this and can do that, and you are worthwhile, and etc., etc. Is that what you found? And if so, at which time period did you step out of that? Because it's another maze, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I felt. I don't know if I consciously had that thought in mind, but I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to prove that I was a worthwhile person, and because I felt pretty much useless, and I was conditioned to think that way, and yet I knew that I wasn't that way, because I could do things a lot of the other kids that I knew couldn't do. So it was strange to me that I felt a certain way, and yet I knew that to be incorrect, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me why those two things existed in one body, basically. And so, yeah, I probably stepped out into the world thinking I was going to prove these suppressive beings that were around me to be wrong, and I was going to show them, and probably show myself too, because I had no proof of that I was as capable as I was. I just figured I'd prove it. I was just stubborn enough to, it was the old thing of shutting down while you're getting your butt whipped, and just shutting out the pain, sort of thing. And so that kind of pushed me through to that type of thinking too. They could think what they want about me. I was going to prove otherwise to myself and to them, I suppose. But, yeah, I guess maybe that's why I wanted to teach, but I ended up in the steel industry, and from the steel industry, I saved up enough money to buy a tourist resort, because my stomach used to flip going into work for those 12-hour shifts. It was so boring. But on the other hand, that's where I learned to rebuild violins, was at the steel industry at my computer desk. So, that's where I learned, and that's where I read the Bible 3 times. I figured if I just had the time to do it, and some of the guys I worked with would mock me for doing that, and I just didn't care what people thought at that point. And then at night shifts, some of the operators from the different parts of the plant would come by and pretend to stop in just to chat, but they hadn't done it before that time. But I guess the word got around that I knew something about the Bible, because I had read it cover to cover 3 times, and so they would ask me various questions, but I always had questions about that too. Like my grandmother is the one who started me on that, because she was such a kind person. She lived upstairs in my parents' home, and she was such a kind person, but I always had problems with that too. Like I figured, well, we're all supposed to follow these 10 commandments, but then the guy who gave us the 10 commandments broke all 10 of them in one shot. Yeah. He come down the hill and smashed the damn tablets. And I'm thinking, well, he just broke all 10 of them, and I'm going to listen to him. So I was always a stubborn person. I always questioned anything, like, I don't know, just different things. Why why panties are panties and then a bra is a bra. It doesn't make sense to me. One's plural, one's singular, but we call one, or why we park on driveways and drive on parkways. And I was always questioning everything. So,
yeah, well, when you get into some of the word magic that we've covered on the show, then you realise there comes the next maze.
Yeah, they got me on a couple of them.
Contracts and whatnot. It's but this element of having to prove yourself has been a big stumbling block for many of us. I went through the same thing, being told by parents, teachers, family that I was worthless and I'll never make anything of my life. And I went, yeah, all right, we'll see about that. Once we're free from the authority, as they call themselves, be it parents, teachers, police, judges and government, and determine our own life path that's in harmony with others, and you cease to care what other people think about your path, that's your true freedom.
Right. Yep. I see that. Yeah. Nowadays, I don't want to. It's like you just described, Thomas. I'm not at the point, or I don't think in the terms of wanting to prove anymore. Anything. I've pretty much proven to myself that I'm capable in a lot of ways more than some others. But now I'm at the point where, and I suppose it's because of age to some extent, but you look back and you think, for me, the big part is I don't want to have been here on this earth and made $100,000. Like, what kind of I just don't want that feeling. Like, how can you leave that behind? What a waste of a life to have traded that, this magic gift that you have, and you trade it for a couple of bucks. I want to help people. I would love to go to Africa and do something with water. I have some patents still on paper that I haven't patented. I kind of follow the advice of Mark Lacasse. Mark teaches his clients to not patent their technology, and I totally concur with him. I have a couple here that I know if I put them out, they're going to be stolen and someone's going to try to make money. I'm hoping it comes to the point where I can just say, here, you guys do that. And maybe I should just put it out freely anyhow. There's some ways that you can use one body of water and distill water using just the sun. And all you need is one pump and, well, maybe two pumps, some glass plates in the sun, and basically that's all. You just use the difference in temperatures. Yeah. So, I don't want to... I've changed my way of thinking for sure.
We're getting to a point in the near future where those type of practices will not be tolerated, and so I don't think you will have too long if you hold on to it. Because the danger is not so much that somebody else will make money on it. The danger is it gets lost forever. And sometimes that's been the case. The guy in Florida, and suddenly he was messing with water and electronics, and found out that the seawater combusts at certain conditions. So you can run a vehicle on seawater. Well, we've got vast quantities of ocean water. Why not use that if we're allegedly, according to them anyway, we're running short of fresh water? Maybe they should shut Nestle down, and then we'd have a lot more fresh water. So there's a lot of technology that's being stifled, and if it's put out at the wrong time, it's I say the fact that somebody else makes money is one thing. The fact that it gets lost forever, and you're waiting for somebody else in another lifetime to come forward with that idea, is more the issue. So you became
for sure.
quite an inventor of a few things. Can you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, sure. Boy, I could. That's kind of a mixed bag. There's been a number of them. They're on the internet. Folks want to look up patents, and then the U.S. Patent Office with my name, they show up. But you talked about the seawater being able to be combusted and used in, say, a car engine and so forth. What basically you're doing there is using electricity to split the electron, and hydrogen or water being composed of H2O is the formula. So you've got hydrogen and oxygen in there. If you can split those molecules, you end up with a hydrogen gas, which is a combustible gas, and that can be collected. In essence, that's exactly what I was doing. However, I wasn't interested in collecting the hydrogen. I was interested in further splitting the oxygen molecule, which isn't, by the way, my patent. It's an ozone technology, but I do have a concept drawing of a better ozone. It's called an ozone generator, and what you're doing is splitting the oxygen off from the H2O water molecule and collecting the oxygen, which would be O2, and then if you split those, you end up with an O1. And that O1 will attach to one of the O2s, and hence you have O3. And that O3 wants to get back to being O2 naturally, so the one oxygen molecule will go on to a germ, or I don't know what the word I'm looking for, like a rust or a piece of steel, something like that, and it'll oxidize it, right? It's called in a microorganism. What happens is the oxygen actually lyses the cell, it cuts it, and the endoplasm within the cell spills up, and it kills it that way. That was one of my big faux pas that really bothered me when I was in the ozone industry, water treatment technology industry, was the chlorine industry was really trying to shut down ozone technology here in North America. Now, ozone is used in Europe to a large extent. It's used in Paris and in different towns and cities in France for water treatment. The company over there that I learned the most from was a company called Degermont, and they put out one of the Bibles on ozone technology and ozone treatment, and that's pretty much been shut down here in North America. I believe ozone is used in the Olympic swimming pools, and I believe in I forget which big city, not Arizona, but down in anyhow, doesn't matter. But it's used in North America to some extent, but the chlorine industry tries to keep the ozone technology kind of stuffed into a corner. And they've put out papers that are pretty much bullshit on what ozone is really about. One of the things, I probably get too technical with some of this, but one of the things you have to worry about is not breaking down a chemical or a pollutant to the extent where it's harmful, because if you're not doing it efficiently enough, you can end up with a worse chemical by oxidizing it only halfway. It's called an intermediary. And so they use that fact to try to say that ozone wasn't a good technology to use, whereas I've got proof and documentation and studies that prove that chlorine is the actual culprit and one of the actual carcinogens that a lot of people, in particular with groundwater and Great Lake water, are exposed to. So, Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I go off on tangents. I've had a lot of life experience.
So, if memory serves me correctly, ozone is O3, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. Yeah,
so I did learn something at chemistry.
Yeah, it's free too. That was the other thing. Like if you want to use chlorine, it's usually in a liquid form, although there is a gaseous form. And chlorine has to be trucked into some of these remote areas, whereas ozone, you pull oxygen out of the air, basically. And air is 20%, and you can actually filter the air and bring the ratio up to like 90% ozone through a oxygen concentrator, and then produce a higher amount of ozone. So your little machine is running there with a little bit of electricity. It's pretty a low amount of electricity, and you're disinfecting water and making potable water that you can use for whatever you want, and it's basically free except for the amount of hydro you use, and that's a real threat to the chlorine industry. And I'm hoping, though, that there are even better technologies. I won't get into it too much, but Mark Lacoste and I have had a couple of discussions, and he has a technology that, boy, it just blew me away. I thought, boy, maybe someday we'll piggyback these together. Yeah. Hopefully we do. But he has a technology there that's just phenomenal. And it's not 100%, but ozone will polish the final product that he's more efficient at than what ozone even is. So who knows? But I'm hoping some of these technologies are combined at some point in time and help the world, because it's there for the taking if you can get the roadblocks out of the way. And I hope that's what happens in the near future, because there's a lot of people suffering needlessly. And it's very frustrating to me to see that happening when I know darn well we can do better as human beings, and these jerks, the powers that be, are stifling that. It's just not right.
Yeah, it's all about, it's like I've mentioned, we've been paying for utility bills for 112 years when we've had the capability of utilities being free with the what's been termed the free energy. The Tesla technology, and JP Morgan, who was proficient in spent a lot of money on the railway lines for coal and all kinds of other things, and they asked in the meeting, where's the meter? And Tesla said, there is none. And they shut it down because they couldn't make money on it. Well, to me, this is where the re-education of people comes in. There's certain things we shouldn't be making money on, the basic needs, other than, like I mentioned earlier, other than what it requires for you to live a semi-normal life with a little bit of extra. Food and energy and housing should all be very, very low profit. But they're the essentials that we need in life. If you're going to make profits, it should be on the non-essentials. But the problem is all these multi-conglomerate corporations have come in and taken over every aspect of it, so nobody makes money by them. And it's wrong. The shareholders on a utility board, they're making money for just sitting in an office. You could reduce people's bills drastically when you're not paying CEOs $400,000 a year. The majority don't do a minute's work per day.
Yeah, or government bodies. Hilly and I are experiencing that right now.
Quangos.
We're going to be leasing a studio here, or not a studio, but a gallery space. It's about 2,500 square feet. Hopefully we get that. But we have to charge more than what we want because we have to cover a monthly tax. The lease rate will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 but the monthly tax is $750 going to City Hall for what? Additional to that, we have a backlit sign on top of above the windows, the threshold of the gallery. We pay for it. We put it up, but we have to pay a fee of, I think it's $100 and something a month to City Hall to put that sign on our building.
Yeah.
Like every little corner you turn at, they want their piece of the pie, but it's not their piece. So their thinking and our thinking has to be changed. That this government thing is just a waste.
Yeah, everything has to be made complex when the solutions are simple. And I've said this all along. It's ridiculous what we've allowed to go on for so long. We've got to a point, and I mentioned something in a show about 3 or 4 months ago. Does anyone else not notice now nothing works? You call a bank and the teller can't understand you, or the automated machine says, "I'm sorry, repeat that again. I'm sorry, repeat that again." Nothing ever works. You buy a new washing machine and a new dryer or a new TV, and it breaks down in the first 2 years. When we were kids, you had TVs for 15, 20 years.
I actually learned something about that in my field of work. And I started seeing it because I pretty much fix anything. The only thing I'm not really good at is electronics, but toasters, anything mechanical, I'm okay with. Mostly because I wanted to see how it worked, and that's why I took it apart. But what they actually do, and the Ford Motor Companies and other companies do it. You see in the screwdriver industry and the screw fasteners, they went from Roberts, which is a square driven screw and screwdriver, which is very secure, and to the Phillips. And the reason they did that was because Phillips strips and there was money involved in graft taken. But the car companies now make cars that will break so that there's a repeat business there. Yeah. And that thought process goes on through everything you buy. Yeah. And so if you're able to fix things, that surprises me, the amount of things that are thrown out. When I was having a difficult time and struggling trying to keep my business going, because I was capable and I had the room in the bottom of an apartment building, I was repairing things and putting them on a free website here where you could resell. So I was reselling a bunch of things. One of my best money makers was vacuum cleaners. Believe it or not, I found so many vacuum cleaners on garbage day. I could bring home probably 20 on every garbage day if I drove far enough, whatever, like around the city. And 3/4 of those were either plugged with crap from dogs or whatever, and people didn't have enough brains to clean them. Or they wouldn't change the drive belt on the front brush, which like 3 screws, take it off, put a new belt on. But people are so conditioned into this disposable way of thinking that they take a $300 vacuum and throw it out on the curb. And I'm sure the prices are kept low enough so that, okay, it's not a $700 vacuum worth getting fixed. It's $100 or $200 vacuum. And therefore, we'll charge you $100 to fix it, so everyone just edges them out, and you get trapped into that way of thinking. They've done a marvelous job of screwing us over.
Yeah. But people have forgotten they have their own choice. That's one of the bigger issues that we covered in the show. The blue pill, red pill. No, neither.
Yes.
Well, why do we have to take what they're giving us? And the same applies in politics. It's either Democrat or Republican. How about neither? None of them are doing anything that's of value to us. So why don't we vote our own people in? But people think, you can't do that. Well, yes, you can.
Yeah. I told that to a neighbor who quickly unfriended me for that same thing. I told him I didn't vote. He said, well, you're the problem. I says, I am. And why?
No.
I guess you don't believe in ETs either. I thought I might as well rub it in while he's angry at me. And then he told me for sure I'm crazy.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the day where they're so conditioning us here that I'm sure there's a lot of people who think, well,
to prove to ourselves that we're not worthless as we've been told, and that proof is a driving mechanism in essence, and that becomes the soul journey instead of seeing the bigger picture. You know, and you've got people who have had ET experiences and then asking, when am I getting ET disclosure? It's always that external proof when you already have it. This conditioning is what basically a large part of what THI is all about, is breaking down the conditioning that others know better than you, others are better than you, and because Trump's the president, he's more important than you. No, he's not. He's just doing a different job. And once you break that down into its base form, then you realise how stupid we've all been. You know, it's like the word we use, authority, for the cops. Cops are just there to observe law and order. They're not an authority.
Yep. I shot a cop down at our house. It was kind of nice. I might not have done it had I not listened to the show, but I did do it, and it worked. And I thought, oh, good. Okay, now I've got confidence in that area. But this female come up. The guy had sprayed Hilly's garden with these toxins, and I got in his face about it, and he called the cops. I told him, well, go ahead, call the cops. So the cops come down, they banged on our door, and they wanted to know my name. And I said, well, I'm not telling you my name. I could care less. I didn't call you guys. And they had no reason to do anything to me. And anyhow, her response to me was, well, then I'm just going to walk away. I thought, geez. Okay, goodbye. Yeah, and she walked away. And she didn't expect that, I'm sure. And then the male officer came up, and Hilly ended up talking to him. It's probably a good thing, because I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been as diplomatic with him being another male.
Yeah.
But my hope here is, just while I'm thinking of it, is that I'm pretty much a person who's pretty much private, although I can be kind of talkative at times. I pretty much like to keep to myself, and what I'm doing right now isn't something I would normally do. I'm okay with speaking in front of governments and various, scientific things or whatever, water presentations. But, and I can see it happening now, is that I'm hoping that what I've learned about myself is that I'm pretty much, for the most part anyhow, a normal person. Yeah. But more than that, I'm more capable than I used to think I was. And an example of what you just described to us, was I learned years ago to play different instruments because my stepfather played. And I heard a number of times people would say, well, you play pretty good, blah, blah. And I said, well, you could play too. Come on over and I'll teach you. We'll have a few beers. And, oh, no, I can't. I would never be able to do that. And I thought, I wasn't able to do it either. There's lots of things we think we can't do. But for the most part, in my mind, it's because we've never darn well tried. If you try, you could be so surprised at what you're able to do.
Yep.
My stepfather told me, and he showed me examples actually of, he used to say, if another man can do it, I can do it. And I read that also in a book, Think and Grow Rich was one of the courses I took earlier on. I think the author was Napoleon Hill, and basically he admonishes basically what you tell us, and that is that what a man can conceive and believe, a man can achieve. And that's basically manifestation. And I've kind of put those three things together, and it's all the same darn thing. It's just we don't know it. Like you just said, we've been conditioned not to believe in ourselves. If we start believing in ourselves and just try one thing, and see the result of that one thing, and then do another thing and see the result, you start becoming confident that, wait a minute, I'm more than I thought I was, or more capable than I thought I was. And if we can all do that, I think we can change things a lot more quickly. There's a lot of capable people just on THI. I see some of the things that some of the members say, and I think, wow, man, I didn't know they could do that. And it almost appears that they just say it incidentally. And I think, wow, that's pretty cool that they could do that. But
yeah,
I'm sure there's a lot of people that can do a lot of things.
Yeah, from every small bulb can lead to a forest. And that applies to you, us on a personal level. There was one of the members in the chat room was talking about certain skills she had, and then she stepped in and says, "I don't want to brag." And so I made that into a piece on the show, because that's another shutdown that we do. Is we're frightened of saying, I can do this, and this, because somebody says, oh, stop bragging, or who do you think you are doing this or that? Well, I'm me, and I'm capable of doing what I put my mind to, and so is everybody else. And this is how we can change, because it's not the government that's telling you to stop bragging, or stop telling you that I've got this skills, I can do this, and this. It's you. Mm-hmm. You are shutting yourself down. So, the system creates enough boxes without us adding our own boxes to it. So, sing what you can do. Don't hide it.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. And learn what you can do.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to learn something. I'm learning, and I'm getting on in years, but I'm more excited about learning the things that, like, for instance, we're going to be doing with this new business venture. I've had a number of businesses, but I'm still going to just keep on going, because it's just fun. It's just fun to do. So, yeah, my advice to anybody here, and that was what I was alluding to, is that we're all more capable than we think we are, and we can help more than we think we can.
Yeah.
We just, like you say, change the way we think different.
Mm.
So
what got you interested in flutes?
I heard one. Yeah, that was it. Basically, I heard one. I was building violins, which is kind of a interesting story. My parents' house burned down. Well, basically burned down. And my dad had 5 violins, 4 or 5 guitars. He'd been a musician. My stepfather had been a musician for a number of years. The house burned. And so these violins were pretty much garbaged, except the wood was still there. Some were in different conditions. So the sly fox he was, there was nobody in the family left in his family that would play a violin any longer. And he had tried to get me to play. I played mandolin and banjo and guitar a little bit, but wasn't really interested in violins. And so he gave me these 3 or 4 ruined violins, and I made a couple of good ones out of them and handed him back the 2 violins, and he gave me one of them for doing the job. Sly old fox, he knew if I had a violin, probably I'd mess around with it enough to do something with it. So I ended up learning to play violin, and I liked that enough that I wrote to England, and I got some good books on how to build violins, and I built a few and learned some of the secrets, being the kind of investigative researcher that I ended up being. I learned what Stradivarius was actually doing with different types of wood and selecting different grains and why he chose them. And there was I think it was University of Missouri Professor Fry, who had discovered using various sound recording and driving devices. He learned what Stradivarius was doing with some of his violins. So I learned that subject fairly well. And I sold a few violins and rebuilt a couple. And then I heard the Native American flute, and just the sound of it blew me away. And I thought, wow, I'm going to build one of those for myself, because I couldn't really afford one. And that was just a couple of years after Hilly and I had gotten together, I guess. We had just moved back from British Columbia. Hilly was teaching, and I was working for the Hilton Hotels out there as a maintenance manager. And anyhow, we didn't have much money. We were in kind of a tight spot financially. And Hilly yelled through the window or through the door to me, "Hey, they're cutting down telephone poles out front." And I thought, well, what do you do? They're cutting down telephone poles. And she said, "Yeah, but isn't that the kind of wood you could make a good flute out of?" And boing, the light went on. I thought, man, that girl, she's such a thinker. So I went out and scrounged a couple of these telephone pole logs and brought them in and chopped them down to where I could use them. And I made my first flute, and it sounded all right. And I continued on from there. And because of what I had learned about violin making, I kind of adapted some of that knowledge to the flute. And now I'm still experimenting. If I can get my shop back together here, I'm making some pretty good sounding flutes that are different shape and a different sound than a lot of the other flutes that are spit out from some of these flute makers on lathes. Not to diminish what they do, but I don't know. My goal is to improve on the sound and to make them easier to play and so forth. But that's how I learned that and why I like it. But subsequent to that, Thomas, I learned, and I actually put a little bit of the information on the THI page there on MeWe. It wouldn't mean so much to me except that I learned the benefits of meditation. And this isn't to promote my flutes in any way or anything like that. There's lots of flute makers out there. But playing a flute has been shown to even have more beneficial effects than what meditation can have. It lowers even further your heart rate. It lowers and changes your beta and theta and gamma brain waves to a more beneficial state than even some meditation can do. Cool. And that was just a bonus for me to learn that. So that's a bit about the flute story. I guess there's a bit more to it, but that's why, in essence,
you kind of connected with one of the native tribes up there, and if so, which one?
Yeah, okay, I wasn't going to name them, but they're fantastic people. They're called the Lillooet Nation. And the Lillooet Nation is north of Whistler, where Hilly and I had a bit of a gallery there. I was the maintenance manager for Hilton Hotels in Whistler, and Hilly was teaching art classes at the high school. And through that, we became friends with the daughter and the son of the Lillooet chief. And when I decided to leave the Hilton Hotels because of some nefarious things that were going on there, which we could talk about at some point if you decide you want to, I decided to try out for a job that was posted as the manager for the Lillooet Nation in their, not their recreation, but their parks department and their roads, that type of thing. I forget what the term is, but in any case, I tried out for that position, and being the person I am, I thought, well, I better know what I'm talking about if they call me in for an interview. And it turned out that the Lillooet Nation was getting money, I guess, from the Canadian government and whatever else to the tune of $30 million per year. But the Lillooet Nation was only 1,200 people.
Wow.
So where the heck was all that money going? And I don't know about that. And also they have a big, the government, by way of taking over the Lillooet Nation land, I think they own all the way down the highway Chloe will know this highway. I think it's highway number 1, I believe it's called. It's the Sea to Sky Highway. The Lillooet Nation owned from Pemberton and farther up into the mountains, which was a 30-minute ride down that same highway into Whistler, and then that continues down into the Vancouver area. So that was the tribal area for the Lillooet Nation. It had been taken over little by little by the government and by the corporate bodies. So the Lillooet Nation was pretty much put into this little reserve, and then a smaller reserve after that, and
it's
the building that was. Sorry,
I said it's the totalitarian creep, isn't it?
Yeah,
where they just take little bits terrible. And on it goes, you know.
Yeah, but I was talking to Kevin about some of these things that are going on out in BC, and I guess the Native community in North America, at least in Canada in general. And this person I was describing earlier, who was the daughter of the chief of the Lillooet Nation, she had the misfortune, in my mind, to be educated at the Vancouver University. And she's pretty much changed her thinking into the mode that is prescribed by the universities. And when I tried to explain to her that Kevin knew, and she wouldn't even talk to Kevin, but when I tried to talk to her about the burial grounds up in, I think it's Fort McBurney, and then right beside the Vancouver University, she wanted nothing to do with it. She's into this reconciliation that the government program is trying to stuff down everybody's throats here in Canada. And a lot of the Native community, from what I've seen, are of that same ilk. They want to put it behind them, but those aren't the people who actually suffered and whose bones are buried in those grave sites. But they've been convinced that we should all just put bygones be bygones and forgive everybody. And to me, that's letting all the bad guys off the hook, and they sure wouldn't let us off the hook if we were doing the same type of thing. Yeah. But, they've convinced some of the younger generation that that's the way to go, forgive and forget. It's just, Well, so we've kind of...
It's whether they've convinced or they've programmed. That's the key.
Yeah. Yeah, we've parted ways. We don't speak now. At least I don't. They had they were getting in each other's face out there and arguing over the flutes and some other things, and I just backed away. I thought, you know what, you guys can do what you want. I'm not getting in between that. You're going to trash each other, even brother and sister. We're trashing each other, and I thought, what are you guys thinking? If that's who you are, how do you expect me to, try to be any part of that? I just don't want anything to do with it. So that's pretty much fallen by the wayside. But Kevin, for those who don't know, I'm speaking of Kevin and Nat. Kevin tried to speak with these same group, and they pretty much shut him out. They didn't want too much to do with him, and so we just let it go. I think that also happened, Thomas, if you recall. I thought maybe we could have that particular person on your show as a guest and to speak about some of the bad things. Yeah, but they actually went along I could tell you some more stories about that. The head of the reforestation program in British Columbia, he's retired now, is my son's father-in-law. He married into that family, which was a disappointment to me, I can tell you. But that family came out and visited Hilly at our gallery when we were in northern BC, or north of Whistler there. He visited us, and the father said to me, he saw the Indian, some of the native art Hilly was carrying in the gallery. And so he questioned us a little bit about it. And his last words that I ever spoke to him, I actually shut up and I wouldn't speak to the man after that. He said to me right to my face, well, I advise you to stay away from these people because they are trouble. And I thought, you ignorant son of a bee. You ignorant, like you're in my home, working, you don't know squat about me, and you're going to tell me what I should and shouldn't do. That was the first time I met him and the last time.
Yeah.
And then my son, well, they were supposed to have a wedding. That was when my son was first married. They were supposed to have a wedding there in that area at a really plush hotel. And I think the father-in-law was pretty well heeled, deep pockets, and he convinced everybody to have the wedding in Mexico. Well, Billy and I couldn't afford that, so I ended up missing out on my son's wedding, which was a pretty big disappointment. He's actually not my son. He's my stepson. His father's from Trinidad. So my son's name is Jason. He's mulatto. And I don't know. It just is what it is. But
yeah,
I've had enough experiences that it's been a great learning experience. I don't regret it at all because I've had first-hand experience at some of the things you talk about.
Yeah, it's, again, we come up with this issue of proof. And Kevin's being kind of pilloried by many people, including government agents, Mr. Webber, in the alternative community. Well, Kevin's provided the proof. Videos, photographs, documented proof, witness proof, you name it. And people just won't look at it. And there's some elements of it is fear. And some people just can't be bothered because it's not happening to their children. It's somebody else's, but it's always somebody else's until it happens to their little private bubble world. And then when they scream blue murder, why isn't somebody stopping this? Why isn't somebody helping? I've lost my child because of a vaccine. Well, did you really care if the child in Britain or Iraq lost their child's life? No. Yeah. It's only when it happens to them, and that's another way that we ourselves have to fix. An Iraqi dying in the war is just as important as an American or a Canadian or a British soldier dying in the war.
Yeah, exactly.
And sadly, some of the, people blame all the ills on the cabal, and I do get that, but we haven't really helped ourselves. Be it white people, be it black people, be it the native people, some of the chiefs. I was asked to do something for the tribal community, and I did warn them that a lot of the chiefs were not native at all, and that's now been borne out, and this is the problem. You've got certain Nazi elements in some of these tribal groups that don't even live in America or Canada for that matter, and unfortunately there's you've been on reservations, most of them are living in abject poverty while the chief lives in a life of luxury. Well, that's not really the native way, is it? It was all about community. No. So they have to correct that as well. And it's easy from their point of view and the black point of view and the Hispanic to blame the white man for doing everything, but they're not actually helping themselves either. And
they're hurting themselves.
Each culture has to step up and then come together,
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on out in the Lillooet Nation. They're hurting themselves. Yeah. For sure they are. And you see some of them riding around in pretty nice cars, including the chief.
Yeah.
And there's some poor people that, they're hitchhiking into town to get whatever their needs are and hiking back, and they're getting $30 million a year. Well, I don't know. It's pretty darned obvious, but how can you be so conditioned as to not see that? That's the question I have when I was out there. I thought, how can you not see that? They're your own people, and you don't see the dichotomy here. There's some rich and some poor. It's totally not the way to be. But they're conditioned to think that way. That's what I've seen. And the garbage food they eat, they have a really nice store there though. You know, somebody put a nice store there, and they're eating garbage food basically. A lot of them are. They're overweight. They're not. I'm not knocking the people. That's just the way it is. That's the truth. They're not taking care of their health any longer. They still do their salmon fishing, and they collect their different types of berries and so forth. And some of them are gardening, but for a large part, they don't look healthy to me. And their way of thinking is definitely not their old way of thinking, from what I've learned from books and reading some of the ways that they used to think. So I don't know what's to happen there, yes. But they're in the same book. They're in the same boat as what we are.
Yeah.
I believe they're not different than us at all. They think pretty much the same as some of the non-thinkers here, and they're starting pretty much to live in the same way, even, as you say, in more abject poverty than what some of us are, and some of us are complaining.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
Well, I saw a thing the other day. I posted it on MeWe. If you've got a small amount of money in the bank, a small amount in your wallet, and a small amount of loose change in your pocket, you're amongst the top 8% wealthy in the world.
Yeah.
And people, I imagine when I posted it, the jaws dropped. And this is what I keep saying about perspective. We think life's bad in America, and let's be honest, there's a lot of people that are struggling, but there's struggle and there's real struggling, and some of these native people are real struggling. They have nothing, you know, they haven't got the basics in life, which is food, energy, clothing and shelter.
Yeah.
And that has to change, you know. It's not how many cars you've got, or whether you've got the top of the line phone or the top of the line latest gadget that comes out, and I can't afford that, and woe is me. There's people who haven't even got clean water. 40% of the planet haven't got clean water.
Yeah. When I was in Pakistan, I saw...
Yeah.
Well, the bad water from India comes through the Jhelum, the Ganges, and I forgot the name of the other river. But there's three main rivers that come from India down into Pakistan, and that basically effluent water, or the dirty water that's coming from India, is the clean water entering Pakistan. And if you really want to see poverty, you've seen on television poverty in China or some of those countries, and even India, I suppose. But if you want to see poverty, I don't know how those people stay alive in Pakistan. But one of the ways that they do, this is to the extent of how poverty-stricken some countries are. I saw, when I was with my driver, I had a chauffeur when I was over in Pakistan. I was off to see one of the government officials, and the chauffeur was taking me up this highway, basically just coming out of Islamabad, and I thought it was a dog at the side of the road, and I admonished him. I said, "Look, stop, someone's hit a dog." And I was pretty naive, I know that now, when I went over there, but he didn't want to stop, and I said, "No, I want you to stop," and he had to do what I told him to do. That's basically what his directive was. So he stopped, and I looked out. Oh boy, I have trouble talking about this still. It still gets me. There was this little boy, Thomas. He was about 12 years old, laying on his belly, and I thought it was a dog. It was a little boy. He was about 12 years old. I don't know if I should tell this story, but it's just the truth, and I'm into it. So I don't like talking about it, but this is how bad it is. This little boy was laying on his stomach, and his legs were pointed straight up behind him. And he opened his eyes and turned and looked at me, and I almost vomited. I couldn't believe it. And the driver started telling me what that was. In Canada, with a website, not to promote them, but anyhow, it's a free website, and you can buy things, clean them up, and sell them on the same site for free. People will come by and buy them. And how I know that is that's what I did with vacuums. I did that with canoes and other things. And if you quit relying on the government for your sustenance, you can maybe not totally support yourself, but you can help yourself by thinking differently. And that's just another example of thinking differently. Those people in Pakistan, they go around and collect junky pieces of wood, any scrap they can, and they'll sit at the side of the road and polish it, cut it with a knife into a certain shape. They'll polish it with a piece of stone, and they'll take it and find whatever kind of dye, like a shoe polish or anything that'll dye that wood, shine it up, and it might take them the most of the day to do that, and they'll take it to a local gas station or some facility along the side of the road, and they'll get like 2 cents for that. But they don't have a choice. There is no other way, so they're forced to do whatever's possible. And there are other ways we can make money here. I'm not saying we're going to get rich or we can actually sustain ourselves, but there are ways. So it's just think outside the box.
Yeah. Right, we're at the top of the hour again, a little bit. I'm going to play your next song, and it's called Wondering Where the Lions Are. We'll be back shortly with more from Darrell Hibbert. Come back to the final portion of today's show, An Evening with Thomas and Darrell Hibbert. We've kind of gone around the world, Pakistan, Canada, and various other places, and all kinds of interesting stuff. And I want you to, it's become clear from speaking with you that you have a love of nature, and farming and gardening, and in particular horses. Is that something that gives you peace, or it's just a hobby, or how do you see going forward with that?
I'm probably not going to. They scare me now. I was bucked off pretty good one time, landed on my head. No, when I was younger, before I was married, I was somebody, actually an insurance guy, and who I had bought an insurance policy from, had a bunch of quarter horses, and I went out to visit them one time, and I just fell in love with them. So I ended up buying my first horse, and I've had a number of them at his farm, and then later on I bought my own small farm, and I was raising quarter horses, and I started showing in some of the Western shows with some of the more roughneck type of things like barrel racing and pickup racing and that type of thing. But then Hilly and I moved out to British Columbia there. The reason we went out was I had pretty much given up on my ozone business. I had met Hilly, and I was pretty capable of fixing things, and my stepfather had taught me how to build houses and do plumbing, electrical, that type of thing. So I got involved in, I didn't know what to do, basically. So I got involved in starting up a handyman business. So Hilly and I, when I met Hilly, one of the reasons we actually hooked up together was she was pretty impressive to me. We met at basically a bar. We decided, well, let's meet, and we talked a little bit together. I said, well, let's meet and we'll have a drink and see how things go. She was by herself. I was by myself. And I learned that she had not only built her own house, but when I went over to visit her at her apartment, she also had a workshop in her apartment. She had a whole workbench of ice and a whole array of tools. And I thought, man, this is a different person. So anyhow, we hit it off, and so that's what we did. We had a small business, handyman business in a town called Sarnia here. And that wasn't going so well. It was keeping us going, but not really well. And we thought, well, maybe we want to do something else. So we thought, well, we'll put an ad in. What do we like to do? So I put an ad in that particular. I was in the particular free ad internet site that I was describing earlier about buying and selling products to make money. And we got a reply from a wealthy rancher in northern BC, up in a town called outside of Williams Lake. It was about an hour and a half drive into that city, but it was outside of that city. And he had 52, I think it was, horses and 2,500 acres, and Hilly and I were to go there and to basically build a resort. And because the horses were all there, they were just gorgeous animals. And one of the horses had won it's called cutting class, which is an event at the Calgary Stampede is one of the locations, but that's where he won his championship. And this horse was the Canadian cutting champion, where that horse would basically cut or remove a specific cow or calf from the rest of the herd. He was the champion anyhow, beautiful horse. And there was 52 others horses, so I liked them. And Hilly and I went out there. We renovated the place pretty much, until the point that we found out that this guy wasn't really honest, and what his real intentions was to have this place renovated to the extent where he could bring in women from France, and that's what he was doing. He had a couple staying at his own property that was separate from where Hilly and I stayed. So we learned of what that guy was about, and we advised these two girls that they probably better leave, or they were going to end up in trouble with this dude. And we all pretty much left at the same time, left him high and dry. And I don't know if he's still alive or not, but his family pretty much had disowned him at that point. And so that was pretty much my experience with horses in a nutshell. I'm at the stage now of life where I'm probably not going to do much more with that, but it was interesting and I did enjoy it. But they say when you own a horse, you're going to get hurt, and it doesn't matter how careful you are. I think the second time I was hurt, which kind of swayed me from owning horses again, although I didn't listen, was my ex's horse. She had a horse she pretty much treated as a pet. It was pretty rideable, but it was becoming a little nasty, and she was feeding him carrots by hand, and you're not supposed to do that because they expect that. When I went into the stall of the barn one day, the horse didn't get his carrot, so he reached over and clamped onto my shoulder, and he wouldn't let go. But when he did let go, I was mad enough that I figured I was going to get him, and I planted him right in the side of the head. I gave him a good punch, but I broke my hand doing that, and his eye swelled up, and I lost conversation abilities with my ex for about 2 weeks. She didn't want to talk to me. I really don't blame her. But, the horse it was her fault. He was trained that way, so whatever. But no, I'm not into horses so much now, and I don't know. We have a little dog and a cat, and I'm going the old man way now, I suppose. But I still like to get out and do some things. I'd really like to help with water technology. I mean, I don't really want to build them, but I wouldn't mind having an advisory position, doing something. I mean, there's a lot of engineers that know a lot more than what I know, but any of the ones that I've met are either arrogant about their book smarts or they're unethical. So maybe they could use somebody that's not going to screw everybody over. I don't know. But that's about all I'd like to do, and maybe continue on with making flutes, because I think flutes would help a lot of people. In particular, I was speaking with actually one of my teachers, one of the guys from down your way in Florida. He was teaching the basic construction of Native American flutes, and he now is at the point, because he likes teaching, he's teaching. He bought a new house, and he has the room and the wherewithal to bring in vets from the warriors and whatever who have PTSD and so forth, and he's going to be giving them free lessons and teaching them how to make flutes.
Cool.
And I thought that was a great idea, so he and I have been talking, and I'm probably going to do something with that, either probably donate flutes or teach somebody. I'd love to have somebody to teach of my techniques of doing this, so that, it would help with some of the effects they've proven in some of the studies, that it's a benefit to play a flute. It helps with some of the trauma of PTSD. I don't think it's a cure necessarily, but if it helps in some small way, that's good enough for me. That's, it's some contribution in that area. So that's one of the things I really like to do. But I was actually contacted on that particular website that I'm speaking of by a vet who had PTSD, but he didn't like one of my posts that I posted, and it was a post from Jim Carrey, the actor, and Jim Carrey said something to the effect that it's the awake people who are most likely to be left on their own by their families, or something to that effect. Yeah. And this vet took offense to that, and he got in my face about it, so I lost any help that I might see from that character. But oh well. I'm going to do something in that area up here. But even those guys, they have problems accepting this, what's really going on in the world. And I suppose I wouldn't want to think that I was over there for ill reasons other than defending my nation.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. Hilly's son is actually in the army here in Canada, and he's teaching, and that's a difficult thing to do, to know that, the injections and the mind conditioning that he's had to go through, and it's your own child. I don't know. She has difficulty dealing with that. So
it's tough. Yeah. So you mentioned you had a brain injury issue. Was that anything to do with the horses, or was that something else?
Actually, I've forgotten about that. But yeah, it could be. That was the one I was talking about. I was training this young horse, and he wouldn't listen to me. And I thought, well, okay, it's time for the spurs. But you don't necessarily use them hard. But he couldn't feel my boots. He was a bit of a small horse. Yeah. And he couldn't feel my boots because I couldn't get up into it. It's called the stifles, but it's up just where the nerves come out of the hind legs there. And so I thought, well, I'll put the spurs on, and I just barely touched them. That was a mistake. He threw me about 30 feet in the air, and I remember coming down, and the clock stopped. And I knew, the ground was hard for sure. It was like clay in our area, so I did a pretty good pile driver. And yeah, it could have been one of the times. But no, I was in gymnastics here in Ontario in high school. I had won a gold medal actually at the Ontario gymnastics meet. And during that meet, there was too many guys that went on to one of the bars there, in the horizontal bar it's called, where you act like a monkey and swing in big circles, basically around this thing. And I flew off anyhow at full speed, and I don't know how far I went up because I don't remember much after, but I know I landed on my hand, and that was one of them. One of the concussions, that gave me a brain injury. I had 3 that I remember from my childhood. One was smacking my head on the sidewalk from ripping down a hill on a 3-wheel bicycle, and a couple was from my parents. One was from karate, and I don't know, there was a few others. But the last one, I was out in BC, there in the mountains, and I was maintenance manager for one of the resorts. And it was really icy, and I slipped on the ice trying to clear the sidewalks for everybody else. And that put me in the Vancouver hospital, actually, where Chloe had worked. Yeah. So I was in there for about a week, and I wasn't recovering too well. It messed up my short-term memory and my balance. So we were forced to come back here to Ontario to be where we thought was going to be some support with family, but turned out not to be the case. Everybody thought because of our new way of thinking that we were crazy, number one reason. Number 2 reason was I had a header and a brain injury. So my psychologist advised me not to tell anybody I had that brain injury, because basically when you have a brain injury, they think you're cuckoo. And
yeah.
So sometimes I don't blame them, actually, but that's basically the brain injury history. So I've pretty much gotten past it, and you adapt, But I'm not sure if, that last injury, I think, they say that it has an effect on your reaction control. I think Chloe described it better. I forget what it was, but it's in the frontal part of your brain in any case.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm looking forward. I won't mention too much here because it's probably not supposed to, but I'm so looking forward to being able to learn some further tools that I know Chloe is working on, because I've really honestly tried for a number of years to correct this, and it still pops up its ugly head, and I still have this anger thing, and I see it right away, and I think, geez, is it me? Are those my thoughts? Or are they not my thoughts? What's controlling my brain?
Yeah.
And when I learned about this reptilian brain thing, I thought, well, maybe it's that part of it. I don't know. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to that, because I'm pretty sure, if I'm as stubborn as I think I am, I'll advance in that area too with some further help. So, but it doesn't really bother me too much now. I don't expect to be a world-renowned scientist or anything like that. If I can help out, that's good enough for me.
Yes, absolutely. You've had a few different paranormal experiences as well. A tall guy in the shop and some orbs, and then a paperclip issue. Perhaps you could we'll go through the tall guy in the shop first.
Sure. That actually it was your last show that it kind of cemented it for me. I kind of knew, I suppose, that what I had seen, but I didn't. I don't know. It's like reading a book and not actually using the information, I suppose. If you don't assimilate the knowledge, then it's pretty much just a book you read. It's pretty much a lost cause. That type of thing. Well, this is before Hilly and I were together. I was in a grocery store, and I'll describe some other experiences along this line. But I was in a grocery store, and I saw this tall guy, almost looked like a man in black. And yet, I can't recall. I think he did have a hat on. But he was walking away from me, and it stunned me. And the thing that stunned me was that I saw around this guy about a 6-inch layer of what looked like fog. I can't describe it in any other appropriate way, but that's what it looked like. And so I actually turned my head away from that, because I thought, okay, I'm having a brain problem or a vision problem or something. I'm not really seeing this. And I blinked my eyes and I looked back, and holy mackerel, that guy is still there, and he looks identical. I'm looking at a few of the other shoppers. No one's paying any attention. And I thought, okay, well, I've got something going on, so I'll just continue shopping. So I shopped further for some groceries, and I went over a couple aisles, and there he was again, but he was walking again away from me. Same thing, same fog around him. Everything was the same, and he walked over to another aisle, I suppose, and that was it. I didn't see him again. Now, Hilly and I talked about this the other night after trying to actually think about some of these things started popping in my head, because I knew I'd be coming on discussing some of these things on your show here. And the thing that stuck out to me, I realized the other day, was this guy wasn't shopping. He was just walking straight up the aisle, dead center, both times that I saw him. And I thought, okay, well, he might have been just walking up the aisle, I suppose. But you would think you would be looking at the shelves in some manner or another, and he wasn't. He was looking straight ahead and walking the other way. I have no idea what that was, but I know what I saw, and I saw that. I suppose it could have been his aura, or I didn't know if he was like an ET. I didn't know what to think. I still don't know what to think of that, but I don't know. I did see it, so
yeah. Well,
I've read a bit about it. And some people can see auras, apparently, and I've seen similar things since. But I don't know what that's about. It'd be interesting if you could kind of explain some things about that, because I'm curious as heck about it.
Well, it can be. some people have the ability to see in different frequencies. Some people have the ability to hear in different frequencies. The fact that nobody else saw it means it was for your purpose.
Oh.
Now, I can't tell you what that purpose was, but that's your sole purpose. You know, it may be a warning. It can also be someone who's watching over you. So they've got your back, so to speak, because we do have certain people do have guardians, and they do have threats. And people might go down a certain road one day and then decide, I'm going to turn off and go a different way today, and then find out there was an accident. That's your helper. So there's things that come in that can alter history as such, because maybe certain ones have more knowledge of the future than we allow ourselves to accept. All of us have psychic experiences, but that's not normal, is it? So we kind of dismiss it. In fact, we dismiss far too much of what we see. You know, what if you see something? That's proof. You don't. We always seem to want somebody else to validate it. But how can somebody else, unless you've taken a picture, how can somebody else validate your experience?
Right.
They can't. And so
I did have one that was validated. I've had a number of experiences. Just by way of you saying about this validation, I used to hunt. I used to be a hunter, and I could justify it by the McDonald's hamburger thing and those animals not having a chance and so forth. And I think the only argument I would see is the one I basically have now. Hilly and I are both vegetarians for the most part. I just can't see myself eating animal flesh anymore. It's just some animal's leg is just repulsive to me. But anyhow, I used to hunt, and I got rid of that. But I was with a buddy of mine, and we were hunting rabbits with some beagle hounds that we had. And we were in the country area north of where we lived. And it was snowing. We hadn't seen anything. It was bad weather. And I had this definite knowing that in the next mile or two, there was going to be a rabbit in the middle of the road. And I actually think maybe that's part of the rabbit hole thing that I ended up going down, learning this knowledge that I'm learning. But anyhow, about a mile or two up the road, I told this buddy of mine, Bob, I said, Bob, there's going to be a rabbit in the middle of the road. He basically looked at me and said, what have you been smoking? And I said, no, I'm telling you, there is. So we got up about a mile up the road. We went over a hill, and holy jeez, there he was, exactly as I described, facing away from us, right in the middle of the road, sitting there. We were both stunned. I got a tingle, and he pulled the truck over and said, oh, how the heck? I still don't know how I did it, but that was one of the provable experiences because he saw it. He never talks about it, though. He won't talk about it. He doesn't want to talk about that. If I bring it up, he changes the subject. I haven't seen him for years, but no.
It's funny how they all do that.
He knows it's true, but
I had an experience of missing time and nearly getting run over, chasing across the road a disc-shaped object, and the other guy that was with me, every time I brought it up, he just ignored it because he was more concerned of what other people thought, and therein lies the problem. he witnessed it himself. So why does he need somebody else to validate it? And this is what I'm trying to get across with the ET disclosure. 32 governments have came forward and give the public the availability of seeing all the ET UFO experiences. There's your disclosure. But some people are still asking for somebody else to come and validate it. And if it's not done in the right way, I could get ETs coming down to me and going, here's a document we want you to read out on your next show. And people will still ask for ET disclosure because they want a military, or it's got to be Mr. Trump, or it's got to be a Kardashian, or someone allegedly famous has to do it. And then we wonder why nothing moves forward. Well, you've already had validation.
Right. Hilly may post this picture if she's listening in of when we were on our way back from, I don't know if I've already spoken about this on the show actually tonight because of that short-term memory thing, but she may post the picture. But we when we were coming back around, I can't remember the town. Anyhow, it was Lethbridge, Alberta. We were coming back through and there was a totally clear sky and a cloud-shaped disc, a huge one. I have no way of giving a dimension other than to say, like, it filled at least a quarter of the side window, and it was off in the distance. It was a pretty big cloud, exactly in the shape of the side of if you were to see what we call a spaceship, that typical almost slim football shape. It followed us all the way around Lethbridge until we got through, and then I had those accidents, with I don't know if we've talked about that, but it's kind of that time shift thing that you described earlier. Should I speak of that? Or?
Yes, it's your show.
Okay.
You talk about what you want to do.
Okay. Well, Hilly and I were coming back along I guess it's the Trans-Canada Highway there. And we were hauling our camper. We were driving a camper van and hauling some of our goods back with us when we moved back to Ontario in this trailer behind us. We came around the corner on the Trans-Canada, and all we saw was a tanker truck, a big gasoline tanker truck coming out of the ditch. So I guess he had gone to sleep. I don't know what had happened. I assume he had gone to sleep. And he plowed with this big chrome bumper on the front of his cab there. He plowed a wall of gravel from the side of the road right up in front of us, so we couldn't see. And so we both closed our eyes and then kissed our butts goodbye. We knew we were dead at that point. I was that sure. If anybody bet me $1 million and I could leave it to my kids, I would say, yeah, okay, I'm gone. Give the kids the $1 million type of thing. We were that sure. I was. But that didn't happen. It broke the window, cracked our window. It broke the lights in the front and the grill of the van, took off the side mirror, and yet we got through the other side of this wall of gravel, and the transport truck was on the other side when I looked in the rear view mirror in the middle of the vehicle of the van I was driving, and the truck was back up on the road going the other way. And there was a couple of cars behind us. I don't know how he missed those either, but it didn't feel like we were fortunate to get through it. It felt like time had actually shifted because he was in my windshield. There was a wall of gravel, and then we were on the other side. Now keep in mind, this is a transport truck. It's not a little vehicle.
Yeah.
How could I get past a whole transport tanker truck being that close to me with all that gravel in front of me? How did I get through that accident? Not a scratch, except it messed up the truck a bit. So Hilly and I had a number of discussions about that. We still do, and we think there was somebody looking over us because we know we should have been dead. Also, the wheels came off of the trailer we were towing, and I should have been dead a couple of times. And I wonder how that happened, being that I was pretty adept at being a mechanical person. I knew those wheels were tight, and yet the holes were not elongated when the wheels came off, as they should have been if they were, had backed themselves off. One of the holes should have been at least elongated, and they weren't. And I'm pretty much convinced that somebody removed the wheels nuts on our trailer. For what reason, I don't know, but we were almost killed then. So there was 2 times on the way back from that trip, I think somebody was looking out for us. That's my honest opinion. Yes. Whether that's the case, I don't know, but I'm convinced that was.
Yeah, it's the battle of the two worlds. The certain ones want to shut certain some of us down, and there's others that are making sure that they don't. And it's not just on a physical level either. And this is where we get into what's normal again, isn't it? And people say, "Oh, that was lucky," or "That was a fluke." Well, perhaps that was by design. And the minute we start realizing there's no such thing as normal, and open ourselves up to all possibilities, then we start to see things a lot clearer than what we're seeing currently, most of which doesn't make sense. And that's the driver for us all, really. We understand very little. We don't know who and what we are. Religion, in my opinion, has made sure of that, where you're always outside of yourself and not internal, which is where all your true answers are. And everything's external. We don't know where we come from. We don't know how we arrived here. Where we, science keeps talking about the missing link. Well, it's fairly obvious. If they can't find it by now, with all the research, it means we didn't come from here.
Yeah, exactly.
And this type of knowledge has been denied to us to keep us in the lower vibration, the lower level, the lower chakras, you name it. And denied us the possibility of true learning.
Right. I'm learning that more and more, that my abnormalness is actually more normal.
Yes, it is.
It's my normal.
Yeah.
And that's okay. My abnormalness is okay. In fact, it's not abnormal to me. It feels like, boy, I've missed the boat so much. I've got so much to learn about myself now that I had no idea. And when I think I've actually manifested something, I'm less surprised by it, and I don't look outside so much. So even now, when I meditate with sometimes something I want to do or want to achieve, and I'll have that in my mind before I meditate. I don't know how well that's worked at this point, but some things seem to be happening, and you just keep plugging along. I try to keep pretty much a positive attitude, and if things aren't going well, you just try to remember that in a couple of days, tomorrow is going to be yesterday. That type of attitude, it's just going to happen anyhow. So just keep plugging away, and things seem to be progressing for me.
Yeah,
to the point I'm even willing to come on the show. So.
Yeah, well, it's. I mentioned about 2 years back for people to be more positive in their outlook because the manifest abilities have increased dramatically. This is going back to the more ancient version of the human, where we had all the abilities which would be classed as normal, and suddenly some rather clever genetic engineering and interfering, and suddenly we've been lowered down again. It's another example of humanity being lowered. And so then they create the next program when certain ones come in and open up the possibilities of you can do things that society tells you can't. So then they roll out a program where they say these people are nuts. Ignore these people, stay away from these people. But we do have, because of certain conditions have now changed on all levels, we do have more abilities, more possibilities for manifestation of what we need.
That's encouraging to know.
Most people would jump, well, I want to win the lottery. Well, suddenly there's 7 billion who also want to win the lottery, and everyone can't win it, and they make sure that you don't. The ones that do win it don't tend to turn out too well. And so, people have to be more trusting of themselves and more open. More doors have opened in the last 3 years than they have in the previous 13,000.
Wow. That's good to know. So, one of the experiences, speaking of a door, was one of the dreams I had that you mentioned there. And I didn't think anything of it too much, and I thought, it's just me having this religious desire to learn more. This is back years ago when I read the Bible, but I had a dream of this, and it looked like, I don't know, it was just a long-haired guy in a gown facing the other way. And it was one of the dreams I never forgot. I don't remember dreams at all, but this one I remembered. And he was kind of looking through the door and with his hand over his shoulder, waving me through the door. And it wasn't a long dream. It wasn't involved at all. It was just basically what I just described. And I thought, what the heck? But for some reason, that seems like such a simple scene that you would think nothing of it. But it had a huge impact on me. And I still don't know why, but it's one of the things I sometimes speak of that actually happened to me. And that was wasn't, I guess it was just an odd experience.
No, it's not odd.
I remember
basically, you were ready for your next stage of learning. The members listen to a lot of learnings in THI, but I can't make them walk through the door. We can give you the tools and hints to look out for things, but we can't do it for you. Only you can do that. And like I said, doors have been opening a lot more in the last 3 years. And when you walk through those doors, the information field expands dramatically, where suddenly things that you in the previous door you were in, you couldn't get answers because you were not in that field of information. And that you go through that door, and then suddenly there's a whole new set of information which may contain the answers that you had before you went through the door. It may require going through a number of doors before you get all your answers, but if you keep learning and progressing, those doors will open when you are ready. You can't just walk through them, because you're not going to... It's like going a kid starting off in kindergarten and going to university to learn quantum science. Kids are going to sit there.
You're not ready.
You're not ready. And that's, that's not a failure. And I must stress that. It's not a failure. It's just your own evolution. And people learn at different stages, and doors open at different stages. You may get a vast volume of doors in a short space of time, and suddenly you are bombarded with information, and some people can handle it and some people can't. And some people walk back through the door because it's too much. And this is why I say on the show, you get to a certain point where as you go through each door, you are expanding your capacity to absorb the next level of learning and information.
Yeah, I think that's true in my case. I know, I think I spoke to you at one point about my nephew there. I'd made I forget what they're called, a display box, I guess, with a glass front, and it had some of the belongings of my stepfather who had passed away. In one of the pictures, he was in the army and he was a guard, and he had guarded some of the German officers, I believe, from the paperclip era. And he told me some of the stories of that. He actually liked some of these officers, and I guess they're just normal people, doing not so normal things. But in any case, that same nephew, when I first was exposed to these things, some of the things he described to me, something of these chemtrails. And it goes back to what you just alluded to, that, you learn when you're ready to learn. Well, this nephew had described to me these things about the chemtrails, and I thought he was bloody nuts. I did not believe that. I thought, why in the heck would the government do something like that? They wouldn't do that. I mean, what have you been reading?
Yeah.
And when I found out that to be true, it opened up every other door I ever would look at, because I knew I had a closed mind on that subject. I could not believe that would be true. So now when I have new experiences or new things, the learning curve, both because of my openness to learning new things, but as you just described, the doors have been opened to us farther than they've ever been. Hopefully I'm going to learn even quicker and be more useful than what I am right now.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem with the non-awake. They're trapped in a box and they can't see the doors.
Yeah. Yep. But I was in that box, so I guess there's hope.
We're all in a box to a degree, but because we're all at different evolutionary learning scales. Some are on the astral, lower, and some are on the higher astral, and some are in the mental planes. Where then that's the key for humanity, is for us all to be or start off in the next lifetime in the mental plane, because then some of your abilities come back. How you can influence the weather, how you can stop hurricanes, how you can make plants grow 3 to 6 to 10 times more than anybody else.
Yeah, Levashov, right. Yes.
All of us have that ability. We've just forgotten.
Amazing.
But they've trapped us in many people in the lower learning, and then instigated wars where people kill each other, which then, for the next time, lowers them down one of the evolutionary scales. So when they come back, they're relearning again. So it's like the loop again. And this is the system that they've created, and the key, and this is why the teachers that came in, but unfortunately, like I said in the last show, most of the teachers or the people that warned you about certain things, like JFK warned you about secret societies and controllers outside of the governments, did anyone listen? No. They waited until he died. And Gandhi, was he really that revered before he died? No. Even the person more commonly known as Jesus, there was many Jesuses. One of them was Radomir. That person had to die before they listened. And the key is to listen while you're alive. Well, these people who have come in, and listen to them while they're alive, and then act on it.
You see that even in painters. I wonder, what is that in the human that does that? You'll see I suppose it's a controlled situation. Once you're dead, okay, you're not going to paint anymore, so therefore the painting becomes more valuable in this society. But even then, just in that small area, just in the arena of the arts, why do they have to be gone before they're revered? And what is that actually? That's honest. I'm serious about that question. Why are we like that? Is there an answer? Like, why do we do that? That doesn't make sense at all to me. Why do we wait until they're dead and gone? Is that a control of the powers that be, or is that part of us?
It's a mixture of both. It's like people who fall out, have arguments. I'm not necessarily talking about partners, because they can get more vicious. But you've been close friends for ages, and you had a falling out, and then both of you really want to make up, but no one will make the first move, and then one dies, and then there's that. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. Sometimes tomorrow never comes. It's only today.
Yeah.
And too much of the way we act is in the past. We're talking about the cabal doing this in this time, and the cabal doing that in that time, and there is value in that to understand the system. But at some point in time, you have to think of the now, and more so the future. How are you going to do it? What are you going to manifest? And this is why I say, ask the question, and everyone goes silent. The cabal step down at midnight tonight. What happens next? Well, the first answer, stock answer, 100% is party time. And then what happens next?
Yeah.
And the silence, because they're stuck in the past and not creating a new future.
It's a pretty complex system to be able to say, well, I suppose everybody can contribute, but, maybe we can keep the system that we have and then change it gradually. For instance, say in City Hall, if you have a mayor and a bunch of people under that person, if you know that person is crooked, maybe we can just get rid of the crooked ones, put our own honest people in, and then pare the system down to a functional system that actually works at a reasonable level where you don't need 20 people doing one man's job. But I don't know what the answer would be to say that we're okay. The cabal stepped down, and now what? That would be volumes and volumes of answers. I guess we all have to think about it. But
the problem is on a global scale is there's not enough jobs. And so they create jobs, for argument's sake, you need a license for fishing, so you need someone who does licenses in the office. If you cut all the waste away, there'll be very few people who have work. And then that becomes an issue, apart from discontent and violence, because they haven't got anything. But it also comes an issue where people start to think, something's not right here. There's no real need for us to be working 40 hours a week, or 60 hours a week, or 80 hours a week, or 2 to 3 jobs to get by. Well, the reason they do that is that you don't have time to sit back and reflect on you and how you can improve and how you can improve people around you. So they just clutter the whole life. And that's why everything's complex. But if you scale it all back and make it simple, and people base their life on what they need and not what they greed, then everyone has a much better life. But you have to educate. You can replace the mayor, but there's no guarantee that the one you replace is not going to be bought off like the ones previous.
Yeah, exactly.
Only with a re-education of how to be going forward will you change that. And that's why it is estimated it's going to be 40 years, because you have to change the mentality and the mindset.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the big things people can do, and it's been said so many times, but when I and Hilly retired, we started gardening. Mostly Hilly did. I mean, she's just good at it. She's got the proverbial green thumb or the green brain or something. She's just good at it. But she spent a lot of time in the garden, and we ate really well. Now we can't so much because of where we're living and so forth. But, I mean, for sure, I can see that there are so many open areas to garden, so many. There's a fellow out there in Kelowna, BC. He actually has what he calls an urban farm, and that's his site, not to plug him, but he's called the Urban Farmer. And he looks for lots within the city of Kelowna, and he gardens them. And it's all organic, and he makes like over $100,000 off of these 4 little half-acre or 1-acre garden sites. And so we look around this town, and Hilly and I have both looked, that there are so many opportunities that are put in these stupid lawns. And if you can just flip them over and make yourself a garden or a community garden, there's one thing everyone can do. They'd be eating better. There's that time, like the amount of money we spend on groceries as individuals now, if people were to look at that, honestly, I don't know what the ratio would be, but I'm sure it's a good percentage of our incomes nowadays. We could, if the system was changed, we could just be gardening and talking to our neighbors and eating good food and enjoying ourselves outside. But we got our butts stuck in the factory working for the cabal. Like, that's just a simple, easy change we can all make. But we tend not to think along those lines. I'm pretty sure, at least I think, what may happen here is when the system crashes or goes down, or when we're all forced to think differently, I have confidence that there's a lot of people out there that we don't hear from. And those people do have good ideas, they have good hearts, and they're going to step forward. I think oftentimes we think that, oh, geez, we think dismay that nobody's paying attention, or no one else thinks like us, or along those lines. And I don't know. I've seen where there's some surprising people, and I think, wow, how did they know that? Or, wow, that's cool to hear them say that. I didn't know they would be thinking along those lines. So there's a lot of people who have a good functional brain that they're just not able to use because of the system. So I'm convinced it's not all gloom and doom. When the time comes, there's going to be a lot of people stepping up with good hearts.
Yeah. So to wrap this show up, how would you personally like to go forward with the future for yourself and as a whole?
Oh boy. Well, for myself, I want to leave a legacy whereby I can honestly say, when the lights go out for me, that okay, I wasn't a waste of time. I wasn't a waste of skin. I would just to go out with a good feeling of, okay, I helped contribute.
Yeah.
And because it's, to be honest, these things that I've done with the ozone business and water treatment, there was times when I used to look over the escarpment at all the crap coming out of the smokestacks, and I used to work in that crap, and I thought, I should just take pictures of this and send them into a newspaper and start some awareness. That was at the early years, and I still feel that way. I want to help, but not in some small scale. I want to be able to help, basically. And that's both for myself and for this world, or however we want to term that. So when you ask, what do I want to do and what would I like to see happen, it's basically all one. It's the same answer.
Yeah.
For me, it is anyhow. that's just what I would like to see. And I think it's going to happen too. I'm pretty confident. Now that I can manifest, they better watch out.
Yeah, good stuff. Right. I want to thank you for coming on. Final thoughts before you go?
Geez, how can you put into words what I'm about to say? I'll fumble at it, but my gratitude is, I don't know how, I just can't express it. For what you're doing and what Chloe's done for me, some of the stuff she's written about, I can honestly say I wasn't sure because I thought I knew what I was doing, but some of the stuff she's written about has really helped me, and hopefully there's some more stuff coming down the pipe that's going to help even further. And that's going to allow me to open up the doors to some of the things I think I can do. So a big thank you, I suppose. That's my final words. And to the group, like, it's been fun to, and educating to, talk to some of those folks and to hear some of their views. And, you know, it's a two-way street.
Yeah. Right. Thanks very much for coming on. And,
thank you, Thomas.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. There's a lot there for everyone. And if you want to come on this show yourself and tell your story, just drop me an email, truth.honor.and.integrity@gmail.com, and you just put 6-10 subjects you want to discuss, and 4 songs for your show, and we'll get you on. So thanks for Daryl for coming on, and Hilly for her support as well. And I'll be back on Thursday with the normal show. Whatever is normal. And hopefully we'll have a rather interesting week this week. We'll see. So we're going to leave with Daryl's final music choice, which is Only Then Will Your House Be Blessed. Thanks to Daryl Hibbert. This has been An Evening with Thomas. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.